Hello everyone and welcome to the back room. This episode is the second of two parts examining, repairing and refurbishing a Tandy 200 laptop. In part 1 I introduced the machine, stripped it, replaced the soldered onboard battery and thereby fixed the booting to black lines screen fault. In this episode I'll strip the machine further, retrobright the plastics, repair a keyboard problem and then rebuild the machine. As you can see, the Tandy has led a hard life and seen better days. The case is very yellowed, both the battery and the expansion hatch covers are missing, and there is the remnants of sticky tape and other marks on pretty much every surface. In its favour, the computer has a memory expansion module installed, giving it 2 banks of 24K, switchable with the F1 function key, and since replacing the onboard system battery, which fortunately hadn't leaked, the laptop appears to work perfectly. As for many in the retro community, I'm often torn between repair and full refurbish, and there's definitely something lost when a machine loses its battle scars during the retrobrighting process. On the other hand, there's nothing nicer than seeing a tired, unloved old laptop return to almost new condition. And that's just what I've decided on here. So now enough talking, let's get on with it. Having already stripped the computer to big pieces in the last instalment, I had only to take apart the screen and keyboard to fully strip it. After removing the screen, I'd put the screws back into it for safekeeping, undo these, and it's a simple matter of using a spudger to open the case. Four further screws hold the screen in place. A quick glance at the board and everything looked fine. Unlike some on YouTube, this 200's keyboard was not especially dirty, but I didn't want to skimp on the refurb, so it was out with a keycap puller and a fun 15 minutes of removing 60 plus keycaps. With the keycaps removed, the felt dust shrouds are revealed and can be very gently lifted away from the board. In fact, I decided to leave the main board shroud in place in order to protect it while I applied the vacuum cleaner. After the shroud and board itself were vacuumed, I gave each key a squirt of contact cleaner. If I'm honest, this step is largely useless in that the key switch mechanism is a rubber cap with a carbon pad meeting and thereby closing a pair of contacts inside a housing, and it's certainly moot whether any contact cleaner finds its way inside. But while the contact cleaner did its stuff, I set about cleaning any remaining marks from the lower half of the computer's case. This had been soaked and washed in hot water and dish soap and then allowed to dry, but still had a few glue stains from stickers and scotch tape. I tried contact cleaner to begin with, but abandoned that in favour of naphtha, which was far more effective. In washing the case, I'd broken one of the battery leads, and so the next job was to cut and tin the lead and resolder it. Next, I rebuilt the keyboard by reinstalling the dust shrouds and picking out newly washed keycaps at random. Unlike stripping the keyboard, this task is hugely satisfying. The return key and spacebar have hooks which engage with the wire support. You can either engage the keycap and click the support into place, or else fit the keycap to the support first and then press it down on the board. So now with the components ready to be rebuilt, it was time to retrobright the plastics. I have an old wooden toolbox for which I made a close fitting lid with a hole and a baffle for a grow light. As you can see, the box is lined with stiff cardboard wrapped in silver foil to reflect light and heat. I use 40 volume cream peroxide and wrap each item in cling film. Periodically, I open the box, reposition the items within and manipulate each to smear around the peroxide. Somewhere between 8 and 12 hours is usually sufficient for a good result, and as you can see here, the Tandy's plastics came out looking pretty good. The case lid remained slightly darker than I would have liked, and I was tempted to return it to the retrobrighting tank, but decided not to risk its coming out streaked and spoiled. So now with everything ready to be rebuilt, I decided to give the machine a quick test before putting it back together. First thing was to rebuild the screen, which is simply a job of fitting it in its case and doing up 4 screws. Don't forget to turn the screw in reverse so that it drops into its original thread, otherwise it will cut a new one in the plastic, potentially weakening it. I like to get each screw in place before giving them all a final tighten. I connected the screen to the motherboard with its ribbon cable, plugged in the battery connector from the bottom half of the case, and insulated the keyboard with a thick paper envelope to stop it shorting on the motherboard. I switched the Tandy on and yes, all seemed to be well. Next I tried each key and inevitably, but also luckily, only one didn't work. Repairing these types of key switches is simple but fiddly. On this keyboard it was the O key that wouldn't work, so I removed that keycap plus those around it to gain access. The mechanism is enclosed within a plastic housing that clips into place on the top and bottom sides. These clips have to be gently pried away so that you can remove the housing. I used my fine tweezers to lift up the clips. However, as I lifted the second clip away, the pressure of the rubber inside fired the housing across the room. I found it eventually and luckily it was undamaged. I lifted away the plunger and rubber cup and squirted in some contact cleaner, giving the contacts a gentle rub with a cotton bud. I also very delicately rubbed a cotton bud over the carbon contact inside the rubber cup. With the keyboard rebuilt, I tested once again and success! The O key was working. All that remained was to rebuild the computer. This is a simple reversal of the stripping process. First, reseat the motherboard in the lower case half. It's held in place with 3 screws, and there's also a screw holding down the expansion board. Don't forget to plug in the battery and speaker connectors. A cardboard insulator covers the expansion board. If you watch the first part of this repair and refurb, you'll remember that this was held in place with masses of red electrical insulating tape. The keyboard is installed next, and then the upper case half, which has a narrow slit for the screen's ribbon cable. The upper and lower halves click together and are held with 4 screws. After sliding the screw onto its hinges, insert the ribbon cable, which is also a fiddly job, and then finally press its cover into place. I plugged the Tandy into my bench power supply, booted basic, typed in hello world code and ran it. From a discoloured, non-working and tired wreck, the Tandy is now working fine and looking almost as good as new. Still on the to-do list, I have to 3D print a battery cover and design and print an expansion hatch cover. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this Tandy 200 getting a little love. Thank you for watching and see you next time in the back room.